lose too much time because I think that we hopefully will have quite a few questions on this. So we are going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining us for this cell series session, Understanding the Role of End of Life Doulas. I'm Kristen Hackbarth with the Nevada Cancer Coalition. And before we get started, I want to share a few housekeeping reminders. Please use the Q&A box or the chat function to ask questions. The session's being recorded and will be posted to the Nevada Cancer Coalition YouTube channel by the end of the week. So if you'd like to watch the replay, it will be available for you. And finally, you'll receive a survey link at the end of this session and via email to rate the session. And we'd love for you to complete that to assist us with program evaluation. So now I want to turn this over to Amy, our Survivorship Programs Manager, to introduce our speaker.
Thank you. So Melissa Chanselle-Hary is an end-of-life doula, educator, and Reiki master in Northern Nevada. She's also the owner and founder of Sacred Transits. She works with individuals and families to support end-of-life care well before, during, and after death. She is the director of end-of-life services for the Doula Co-op of Nevada and lives in Sparks with her 13-year-old son, husband of 20 years, and many, many plants. And while Melissa gets her slides pulled up, we will quickly launch the poll. And we want to learn more about your experience with end-of-life doula. So it's just 2 questions, and that will help us guide the conversation. So Melissa, we'll turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I just want to take a moment. I guess I'll take the poll, even though my answer is yes to this. Oh, no, I can't vote. Got it. Okay. I just want to take a moment to thank the Cancer Coalition of Nevada and Nevada Cancer Coalition for meeting with me. I was introduced to all these lovely people last year. And so including me in the conversation and sharing information with me has been really beneficial. And I'm really excited to be here. So thank you for joining today. Thanks for giving me a little bit of your time and space on a Wednesday afternoon. And I hope that you learn something new and that we have some fruitful conversation at the end of this. So I'm going to share a little bit today about the benefits and the purpose of end-of-life doulas and talk about end-of-life doulas in the spectrum of care. Because as I have been doing this work in Northern Nevada over the past couple of years, I've just noticed some different things and I've had some really interesting conversations. And so to have it with some of you who are doing this work out in the world, I think is just a great opportunity. And so just seeing out of our voting right now, I don't know if the poll's closed, but great. So I've got some results and we'll come to this in a minute. So, you know, a little bit about me, the first time I served as an end-of-life doula was really accidental, but it also proved that it was a calling. So when I was 31, my best friend's brother chose to end his life. And so we weren't prepared for it. I mean, we had known that there had been some challenges, but I just knew what to do. And so in that realm, I was really helping in the aftermath of a loss. And I remember in that experience, this person who was like a second mother to me basically saying, "How do you know what to do?" And I was like, "I don't actually know how to explain this." So I think some of us who do this work, it really is a calling. But I sort of understood the situation that was at hand. I understood the different players, the different needs, and it was trying to figure out how to show up. So that was my initiation into being an end-of-life doula, and then pursuing it formally was something that would take me another 10 years between my own study, my own reading, my own development, and quite frankly, my own courage to say, I think I want to do this kind of work. So that's just a little bit about me. And I work with lots of different kinds of people, and I've had the benefit of seeing different situations that inform this conversation today. So for some reference, this is, let me make sure I'm on the right screen here. Here we go. So just to give you an idea of where we're headed today. So just a little bit of an introduction about me and some of the organizations I work with, what end-of-life doulas do, sort of the current state of that work and what it means to embrace doulas. And then we'll share some upcoming events and have time for questions. So should be something that goes well with your lunch today. I hope you're having a good one. So one of my favorite quotes is from a hospice volunteer named Ann Richardson, which is, "We cannot change the outcome, but we can affect the journey." And that feels really true for end-of-life doulas. And I would argue that those of us who are in end-of-life work, it's not just the last couple weeks or months. Like, that's a journey that can start well before then. And in fact, I think with the support and presence of end-of-life doulas, we can shift the narrative. And in fact, I think we're already doing that to some degree now. And I've seen the tide shift and change, even since I've been doing this formally in Northern Nevada. So I'm Melissa. In this life, I'm an end-of-life doula. I'm a relationship and intimacy coach and a Reiki master. Some interesting things about me. I used to be an actor. I was a teacher. I was a pastry chef. I did run teams of people in e-commerce, and I worked in local government. So I've lived lots of different lives, and I would argue that every single one really set me up to be the kind of like well-trained, and I have a very like robust uh, tool belt of skills to pull out thanks to all of this experience. And one of those skills came to be as part of the Doula Co-op of Nevada. So right now I'm the end of life, I'm the director of end of life stuff, but I'm actually going to be stepping aside to allow Christine Ruggiero to take over. And that's just because I have some end of life situations for people who are very close to me who I'm helping at this point. So I just need a little bit of time and space. But the Doula Co-op of Nevada is this incredible organization run by the executive director, who is Jen Campbell. It's based in Reno, but we serve the entire state. It's a 501(c)(3), and it's a collective of birth and end of life doulas. And the point of the organization, like the three pillars really are to support, educate, and advocate. So we are working to support the workforce development and the pipeline of doulas who are interested in doing the work, helping support families who want that kind of support in life's greatest transitions, birth and death, and then educating both the public, our industry peers, and families and doulas internally about, best practices, new theories and approaches, and just information in general about how to approach this work effectively. And then advocating. And so we have advocated both internally and externally with different peers, but also at the legislative level. And so we've had successes for birth work, and we're working on different initiatives for end of life work. So there's no shortage of things to be done. It's a small but mighty group of people that is growing. We've, I think, gotten 17 or 20 new doulas in the last 2 months. So it's really exciting for us, and it's an exciting time. And I think in the landscape of healthcare and what it is right now, there's room. There's room for people to share the load to make a better experience at both ends of the spectrum, at the beginning of life and the end. And right now, so in the birth side, there's the Doula Access Program at Renown, where specifically we have some members who go and work shifts at Renown and are available birth doulas for the families. And so it really is becoming a more integrated level of care, and it's super exciting. So if you're interested in learning more about the Doula Co-op of Nevada, the website is there, and I'll have another slide towards the end. But it's really great people doing really great work, and I've been so proud to be a part of it for the last 3 years. And I'm still a member, and I have projects I'm actually still working on in Northern Nevada. But I am really excited for Christine, who started her own Death Doula Collective down south. So she has all of the appropriate experience to lead the end of life stuff. So it's super exciting, and it's one of the reasons I'm here. So thanks for listening to us about the Doula Co-op. Okay. I just want to check in. So I don't know that there really is I don't know if there are chats or people can come off mic, but like, what do you think a death doula does? I'm really curious. And then the poll that I just lost access to, so I clicked on something and it went away. 50% have heard of end-of-life doulas before. Only 13 have worked with one before. You know what I love about that? 13 is more than zero. 13% is more than one. So I love that. And then, yes, please, I just want to invite Kristen, put it in the chat, to share any questions you have in the chat or Q&A, and they'll help us manage those. So please put those in. And I really support the dying, support the families and caregivers. Yeah, definitely. That's definitely one thing, and some of the things that we do. Yeah, and if anything you're not sure, because I think a death doula can do lots of different things. And so we're going to talk about that first, some of the things that we do. And I really welcome all kinds of discourse today. And so even if you've had maybe a negative experience, it's okay. Like, I think it's when we can talk about these things safely or really have a space to explore. So anything, any impressions you have, I'm open to you putting it in the chat. I'm very much in the space of like, hey, there's a need for us to do some of these things differently, and there's a way for us to do it together. So we're going to talk about it. What else do we do? So all death doulas, what is kind of interesting about them is that they're actually all a little bit different. And so if you are interested in using one, please know we always recommend both on the birth and end of life side to talk to several, talk to a couple of doulas because you really want to get a sense of their vibe, how they view the world and how they view their work to understand if it's congruent with you. But we are all a little bit different. That's actually the really beautiful thing about end of life doulas. So we help before, during, and after death, and we help with end of life preparation. So and we'll talk a little bit about what death doulas are not, but will really help some of the preparatory conversations and some of the social and emotional considerations as we think about what would lead to the ideal, like what is an ideal death is a very common question. And it's something we have very little control over. And the purpose of the conversation isn't so much to be prepared to die. I think that's a common misconception, or that the assumption is we're going to have a conversation and you're going to feel ready to die. It's not so much that, though I will say I have had clients after some of the exercises and things that we've gone through, they do feel more ready. But the point is actually just to talk about this thing that we know is inevitable, that we also can't control or predict, and just have some really thoughtful and intentional conversation and potentially action items to make it the sort of as managed or as prepared as possible, because there will always be some element or some percentage of it that won't be, that we can't prepare for, that we can't know. But normalizing the conversation within ourselves and with our families is a really important part of it. And there's lots of different kinds of preparation, financial, logistical, real estate, legal, but we'll get into that because that's not necessarily what death doulas do, but we work with a network of people to make sure that a family has what they need. So we support in illness and in active death. So during the progression of illness, and that can look like a lot of different things, which we'll talk about, and then bereavement, grief, wrapping up affairs. So before, during, and after. So in end of life preparations, meaning logistical, practical, emotional, and spiritual. So um, advanced planning, care planning, and options. So very much so like your options, and in this culture, in this country right now, your resources actually determine the kind of death that you can likely expect. And so having some thoughtfulness around what resources do I actually have, or what am I missing? What are ways for me to think about care differently? And depending on how things unfold in the next couple of years, I mean, by 2027, the United States, I think we have something like 28 million adults who are in their upper generation, so 65 and older, without children. And by 2032, it's going to balloon to 55 million. That is a lot of seniors who do not have someone to help support them in planning and executing their own care over a period of time that can be, a couple months to decades of care. And so just even talking about what resources do you have, what kind of information would you need, or would it be helpful? And if any of you work with older people, like technology changes, the flow of information, there's actually a lot of support that is needed. And if they have the resources and have been planners, then typically they tend to be in better shape. But I think depending on the work that you do, you might all know someone who isn't as prepared or hasn't even thought about or has no plan for what it might be. And quite frankly, I've seen in situations where he was young, he died of an acute health event in his late 60s. He had 42 properties and he didn't have anything, like zero paperwork, right? So had anyone just gotten a hold of him, would have been like, hi, here are some basic things that will help you and your family. So personal belongings, who gets what? I have clients who have a second home and they have a lot of stuff to go through. So even starting the conversation now, they're in their 80s, they're in the Midwest. But it was just a helpful conversation to say, you have a lot of things between two houses. And it was in our situation that their sons could look at them and say, please, please don't leave the lake house. Like, please let us start cleaning that out. And it's been a really life affirming and like connective point for them to pick the things that matter to hold on to and to sort of cull or winnowing is what it's called when we winnow the things we don't really need. Some of you might be familiar with the show and the book, like The Art of Swedish Death Cleaning. You don't have to wait to be ill to have those conversations. Additionally, legacy work. So I know some doulas who really just do art and work and legacy work. I know a woman here, she does felting in Northern Nevada, and she'll felt cremains into like a wall hanging. That's not everyone's wish, but just to know that that creative outlet is there, or if somebody wanted it, That's part of the beauty, I think, of doulas is like there are so many different things that can be done, and just having a comfort of like, let's just talk about the options. So examining and communicating preferences, this is a big one, especially when we can get in and be present with people early and being like integrated into the family where people know us so they feel comfortable talking about some of this stuff. And because I don't have any skin in the game, I don't have a perspective or an opinion about what anyone should do. My job is to meet the situation in front of me. It allows me to just hear different sides of the situation and also just represent the information and create space so that people can have the conversations that they need to have. And when it's all done, I've really noticed that it does lead to a sense of clarity on like how to focus their time and what they want to do with their time, their life, or their resources. So in active care and support, these are non-medical, like we are a non-medical supplement in illness and active death. So things we can do, and I just really want to stress, there are things we can do, but what we do varies very much on the care team that's present and what the situation actually needs, right? But we can do respite care, we can do housework, errands, pet care, organizing information and coordinating care. I have a couple that I'm working with now, and they need a lot of that from me, which we'll get into in a little bit. Emotional logistical support, like in disease progression. I don't know if some of you are like nurse navigators or like how you work with different people, but if someone's got a terminal diagnosis, but then there's also like a care plan, this can go on for a long time. And just having someone to turn to, whether it's via text, phone number, but someone who over the long haul can also have the same amount of information or be aware to like walk the path with them. It just helps lighten the load for everyone. I've been in those different situations, and doctors and nurses and other parts of the care team are so helpful, but they also only have so much time. And we'll get into it when we talk about the different scenarios, but it's just there's space because there's a lot that's actually needed. And the ability to really hold space for the other family members because it's a really different experience, like the person who's going through a disease progression versus the person and the caretakers who have to observe and watch. Those are separate experiences that are affected by each other, and being able to be present and support can actually broaden everyone's and sort of fortify everyone's endurance and sort of nervous systems and ability to participate in the care over the long run. And really, something that I think we do a lot of is we create and maintain comfort and dignity for the dying, because part of our job is really just to allow the conversation for what options are available. And to know it's important, like with all roles, when you have a care team, you have to know your lane, but it's also just letting people know here are some options. And not all options are available to everyone, but when there are options, and being an advocate to be able to ask, to clarify, to help manage the information, and then really help people hold space. So I'm going to talk about that when we get into the actual locations that we can how we show up in the different locations. So wrapping up affairs, grief, and bereavement. So support with tasks and the emotional load of the initial grief, right? Support with paperwork, communications, even logistical needs or organizing, just like letting people know if people can see the body, if where that is, what things are needed, food, not food, transportation, all of that stuff. And then we can assist with honoring the dead or ritual planning. And continued grief support. And some death doulas do that and some don't. I'm more of a generalist. I kind of do a lot of different things. And again, you just can also hire the doula for the section of support that you need. So you may not need some of the care support, but you know you're going to need help afterwards, especially when you're going from a we to me situation. That can be a really great time to have a death doula for the back end of the things. So I want to go over what death doulas are not, which I think is sometimes helpful. So like we are not, so when I'm in the role as a death doula, I am not a medical professional. Now, some medical professionals have death doula training, but you need to have separate trainings. But in the role, especially when I'm acting as a doula, I am not a medical professional, and I do not have any formal medical training. I am CPR certified, so that's about it. And in most cases, I am not applying CPR to my clients. I am not a financial advisor. I'm not a legal advisor. Now, I have a death doula peer who is a lawyer. And so she thinks of herself as a lawyer for the doula and a doula for the lawyers. And she's got a great thing going in California. She has a great podcast. Her name's Liza Banks, and she's amazing. But so she is a legal advisor who has death doula training. Death doulas are not funeral directors. So in the state of Nevada, only funeral directors can handle disposition and host a funeral and use the word funeral in Northern Nevada. Now, if someone has the unique privilege of dying in their home on their own terms in the way that they want, you can also keep the body because the laws are for a period of time. There's a reasonable amount of time. So there are things that a family can do to honor their family or take time to process the loss before disposition. And sometimes people don't realize they have that space or that right um, without a doula, right? And some funeral directors are great and are really good at letting them know everything that they can do. And we'll get into that in a little bit. But we're not funeral directors. And some funeral directors are end-of-life doulas, which I think is a great compliment. And I'm super excited that more of them are sort of taking this perspective. Because with end-of-life work, it's also about embracing the normalization, talking about it sooner, being more proactive, and helping normalize for lots of other people and for lots of other reasons in our culture that it's so difficult to talk about. It's like really trying to shift our approach. And it's a side note, but like our perspective on death as a country changed because of the Civil War. So due to technology, and it was the first time that we had bodies of our dead that needed to come back to us that were very far away. And so it was actually the need to embalm bodies for travel without massive refrigeration opportunities that even became a skill that needed to be developed. And then because of that need, it then turned and just shifted the culture in general. Like there was a whole shift that happened between how funerals were handled, because before then it happened in the home and it was primarily the women and the caretakers of your property, ranch, plantation, wherever you were, attending to the death of the people in your family. And after the Civil War, it changed, and it just changed the perspective and the culture around dead bodies and what it meant. And then obviously there was a business opportunity and a career opportunity in managing funerals. So our culture around it changed about 200 years ago, 250, 100. I'm not good at math. That's why I'm an end-of-life doula. So what is that? Yeah, 200 years ago. 175, something like that. I don't know. Don't come to me for taxes. That's what I'll say. But it changed. And so we're back in a place where I think the pendulum swung in one direction and we can maybe come back a little bit where it doesn't have to be as over medicalized and we can start to recognize that it is a natural process like birth. And that's part of the movement with end-of-life doulas. So having funeral directors in on that conversation is great. And then finally, therapists. So I am not a therapist in that role. I'm not a trained therapist. I'm trauma informed, and there are other parts of my training that support tender and intense situations, but I'm specifically not a therapist. And even if a therapist has end of life training, if they are doing the role of an end of life doula, obviously their therapeutic skills are supportive, but they are specifically not a therapist in that situation. So I think it's just helpful to know like that we understand sort of what we're not and what we don't want to be and what we're not meant to be. And we know that. And so then it's like, then how do we fit? Where do end-of-life doulas exist in the spectrum of care? So one thing to know is that we're not formally recognized. So we're not reimbursed by Medicaid, Medicare, or private insurance right now. There are things working on different waivers, for like traditional supports. And so in certain contexts, for some people, they may be able to get reimbursed for certain kinds of care. Death doulas are not officially there, but that's something that we're very interested in as death doulas and the Doula Co-op of Nevada, because that's one of the amazing things that the Doula Co-op did participate in for birth doulas. So in 2019 or 2021, I think it was Chandra Summers Armstrong. I'm so sorry if I'm getting her name wrong, but she ran a bill that basically like said they would reimburse, that Medicaid at the state level would reimburse birth doulas. And then the Doula Co-op was participatory in getting the reimbursement tripled to a like really great rate with a $200 bonus for those that are in the rural areas, because our rural areas of Nevada are incredibly underserved, both for birth and end of life and aging. So there's room and need for this kind of support, and there are people who want to do the work. But there is some work to be done when it comes to how do we make a path that protects everybody, right? Protects the practitioners, protects the public and the clients. But we're not formally recognized yet, and so it is private pay. It's non-medical supplement, so we can help expand the entire capacity of the care team, and we are space keepers in that sense. And we need, which I'm going to talk about because that's the next slide, is to really talk about like what about with hospice, what about with palliative care? Like we need them. Like hospice creates and provides, some of the medical oversight and the supplies, and then we can like round out the offering so that it's more robust. There are many points of entry because it can be before, during, and after death. And quite frankly, so I have a 13-year-old son. When he's 18, we need to have a conversation where I'm very clear about what he wants for his body. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen to him. And it's not about, because talking about death does not make it happen faster. But I really want to honor what my son wants for his belongings, his body, and he should be having that conversation at 18. And it's one of the things I'm more interested in is how do we just normalize the conversations with these young ones so that it's just a normal update every, I don't know, 5 years, 10 years, like this is what we're doing, this is what we need, so that it's just a part of the approach to how we're living our lives. But there's many points of entry, right? And it can be that you need help. So I really, as a doula, I work for who hires me right now because it is private pay. So sometimes I'm hired by the person dying. Sometimes I'm hired by the family member because they need support, right? And so again, I get to show up in the way that helps the situation at hand. So there are many, many points of entry. And we have an informal status, right? So I think there is this opportunity that is not getting leveraged for how flexible end-of-life doulas can be. But we really enable the ability to tailor the care and be present that's not necessarily afforded by some of the systems that are in place. To clarify a couple things, there's no formal certifying body for end-of-life work. So NEDA, which is the National End-of-Life Doula Association, Alliance, I always mix them up, and then INELDA, which is the International End-of-Life Doula, either association or alliance. The two organizations are the closest thing we have, and they are working to establish standards and ethics. And it's been a major push for those of us who are in the end-of-life realm for just having standards and ethics, much like birth doulas. Birth doulas do have a certifying board. End-of-life doulas do not have a certifying board, which if you're in policy or understand, that is often where people start to get, when you want to put things into policy and put things into like NRS, these are the kinds of things for safety reasons and for good reason we need to clarify. But then a lot of end of life care and home agencies and things, there's not a ton of oversight. So then it's this kind of potentially stressful, initiation to like, oh, bring doulas in, but if they have more oversight, what will that bring for us? And so there's just this space for us to sort of talk about how it's possible to actually all work together. Yeah, so we'll get into the actual part, which is the part that I am really interested in talking about. So where do we fit in? And I don't know, I'm biased, but I'm gonna basically say I think we can fit in everywhere. So hospice. Hospice is not 24/7, and a doula can support in ways that extend the care of the existing team. And I feel like I have really good personal experience with this because I have been a hospice volunteer for 3 years. And I have been in several different situations where uh, there's more that I could have done if I had been sort of not just the hospice volunteer. And I get it. Like hospice, I also believe so many people should be going on hospice and entering palliative care much earlier than they are. And I think with the presence of doulas and people talking to them and having someone safe who's saying, "Hey, I know this is sticky. I know this feels weird, but hospice does not mean you're dying. It doesn't mean you're giving up, but it does mean you'd have all these other accoutrements, all these other programs or things that are available to you. So can we just talk about it? And what if I remove the word hospice, but I told you you could get this and this and this and this? Like, would you do it? It changes the conversation. And so just having someone do that, but also people go into hospice at acute times, so they can't really make the decision. And then involving another party going, well, here's an end of life doula that's an additional cost. Like that also doesn't feel good to end of life doulas. I'm not trying to come in at an acute moment when people are really dysregulated, really taken by surprise, especially with like terminal diagnoses. Um, that it comes in and then we're like, oh, also, I'm another person you can pay, right? And so I get it because payment does matter and it is part of it. But I think if we can get in a little bit earlier, then it's not the like really uncomfortable or what feels like we're at odds or we're in competition. I really don't believe we are. And into that realm, like hospice is not 24/7. And I think sometimes the belief with end of life doulas is that in some respect, this is duplicative. And sure, I mean, it absolutely could be. Hospice has a chaplain. I do spiritual stuff if you want it, but I don't need to be the chaplain. Hospice has a nurse. Yes, I'm not the nurse. I'm not the medical person. You have a social worker. Absolutely. But the social worker, and here's the thing I really want to stress, especially if any of my friends who are here in this conversation are in hospice. What I have noticed is that if I have an observation, it becomes difficult to share because it can feel like an indictment or an accusation that like you're not doing your job well. And at the end of the day, we do know money is involved. Like there is a per diem, there is a cost, and it like there is just a reality there. But I have certainly been in situations where, like, yes, there is a social worker, but the social worker only has like 30 minutes, one or two times a week, if that. Maybe that's not every hospice. I'm just saying some of the things that I have seen. Or the social worker's not that involved because staffing's really hard and caseloads are really, really high. And so there are ways in which I think death doulas can do some of this stuff if it's needed, right? And if it's not needed, no problem. But the flexibility and the shapeshifter nature of a death doula really just helps everybody out. Because if you just need someone to go and sort of do some companionship, a death doula can do that, especially if your volunteer numbers are low, because we know a percentage of your volunteerism is like mandated, I believe, by law, Medicaid. And I'm speaking maybe a little bit out of what I don't know, so please correct me in the chat. This is a place where everyone's wisdom is medicine and everything is welcome. Um, but so there are things like I have had experiences where like keeping this space is not really attended to because no one's attending to that, and it would have been really nice for either the person dying or the family. And I'm someone who like does a lot and offers a lot, but it's like this isn't totally my role, or what do I do? And I'll never forget having a client who's was dying of cancer in her home, was on hospice, but her husband could not be present with her dying because of caring for the pets. Like, I just won't get over this one. And everyone saw it, but no one did anything. And if that seems like it's an indictment on the social worker, maybe, but it seems like it wasn't the social worker's job. And I was a volunteer in this position. And I offered, I said, can I please just find a temporary housing? Like, she doesn't have long. Can I just get the dogs like a foster placement and then the dogs can come back? But he's so dysregulated caring for the dogs, like he's not present. And he even said that he would like that. And I had to go through all these hoops to ask the hospice if I could do this extra thing that wasn't technically my job as a volunteer. And within like literally, y'all, 20 minutes, I had three homes who would have taken the dogs. They were all doulas who were amazing, who were like, we get it. This is like community care, collective care. How do we do it? And then because of just the way y'all work in the system, you know, but the way communication goes and having to check in with different people, it took a while. And by the time I got permission to do it, she died. And it was just one of those things that was like, man, if we just approach this a little differently, there would be space to help. And it's not that the social worker failed, and maybe it is, and maybe that place would want to run it differently, but I don't think that that's the case. Like that social worker had so many cases, like that's not a thing he could have done, but it was absolutely something I could have done if I had met the family earlier and they hired me separately, or if doulas were included in that system to sort of be the catch-all for the weird things that fall in between. So there's just a lot of things that it can be. We just have to open up the landscape a little bit to be like, is it possible? Could we? So in hospitals, my observation is like the nursing staff and the medical team don't always have the luxury of time. And I've seen so many good doctors. I have a client right now who his leukemia has, or his cancer turned into leukemia, and then his wife was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And so that's a lot. That's a lot for them to handle. And their medical staff has been amazing. But I have also watched where like the medical staff is saying things to them and they're nodding and saying yes, and then it's not totally soaking in. And it's only because I'm there and I'm with them that I can be like, and the staff gives as much time as they need. But I've also noticed like where he was staying, the staffing was lower. There were just lower ratio or higher ratios of staff to patients on the weekends. And there's just a presence and a support that I can offer because they value this kind of support. And this is a well-resourced couple. So they're well-resourced in the sense that there are benefits from the VA that are taking care of some things, benefits from Medicare that are taking care of some things. They have family, right? So I'm not doing some of the things that they need, but I am pointing out things like, oh, remember, this is your shot week. This is the tough week. This is when you don't feel well. What are things we can do to like minimize some of the challenges or make this easier? How are we recognizing when your body's starting to react to like your immune system's down, you're starting to get a fever, like you gotta go, but just being there as someone who's sort of like quarterbacking the thing that's like, what does this situation need? So I show up in a particular way for them because they have all these other resources. Um, so treatment and palliative care, again, if we could be involved with people and if palliative care providers can say, hey, you've got time, but we're just trying to manage things. Here's someone who can help with some of the stuff that we can't. Like it depends on your program, and I love to get in touch with more people, but to understand like, oh, do you give people, so my friend in Georgia, the person I'm going to be helping here and present with here soon, she got a binder and she jokes about it, but she's like, I got a cancer binder, but I can't tell you that I knew what to go do. And I think it makes sense. It's really overwhelming. It's a lot. And so just again, having more hands, more voices and support to say, hey, this is helpful in this way. And how can I show up and what do you need in this way? Because I've even talked to nurses who are like, and the nurse was so funny. She was like, I'm not trying to be dismissive, but I need them to have a friend. I can't always do the thing that they need. I was like, yes, I agree. I want to be that friend. I want to be the doula for them in that moment where you talk to them, we make sure we have what they need, you come check on them. But then I help fill in the gap where they're missing some of the information or they're a little disorganized. And I'm just helping like shepherd it along a little bit to keep it all going and meeting people where they're at. Like that's the role. And that birth doulas and death doulas understand that acutely. So in the home and senior living, um, even if they have home care, right? Like, sure, then great. Then home care can do the light housework. I can do the food prep, or I can run the errands and go buy stuff and bring stuff. I can walk the pet. I can help with laundry or not. But especially in senior living, what I really think, because I've had some clients and some volunteer clients in senior living, and like so much of it is outsourced, and then it's sort of like collectively everyone's taking care of the space. But I do think the staff, the carers, the care staff in the senior living facilities can't always dedicate the time, especially when people are actually passing and in transition. And in all of these cases, like hospice, hospitals, palliative care, treatment, and senior living facilities, I think it's a thing that can differentiate you in the marketplace. Like, quite frankly, when you say we value doulas, when we say you get a little bit more one-on-one attention, like end of life doulas, and the doula co-op is very interested in creating some of these programs and partnering with people, but to have doulas on call in senior living communities when people are passing. So I have been in senior living communities where they just don't even acknowledge it, and then the community or members of the community, like their friend hasn't come down to lunch for a couple of days and no one said anything. And it is not a HIPAA violation to share that someone passed. You can't share how they passed or when they passed or what of, but you can, and there are just little ways, especially in senior living communities, like something as simple as like a picture and a book where you let people write them notes and just light some candles, or even lighting candles outside the door just to indicate that there is a transition that's happening so that we're not avoiding the conversation and we're actually creating space so that if people are having feelings about it, I mean, it's hard to be in a senior living facility. Their friends go kind of quickly, or stuff kind of happens like one after another. Someone gets hurt or they get sick. Or, and especially we know just on the cyclical side, October to February is a real time. So not only are there holidays, but there's a lot more loss in general because that's when the body sort of feels nature and it's like time to go. And so I just think there's a real opportunity for doulas to hold space, to sit vigil, to be present. It can differentiate people in the marketplace. And it's a really beautiful, just I think, tribute to like human life and starting to realize that it matters, that threshold matters. And I noticed specifically, I could help hold the space, meaning tidy some things up there are just piles of things that sort of happen, because there's different people and family members doing different things, but no one owned the space. And I felt like that was a huge opportunity for really improving the quality of life for anyone in a senior living facility. So those are just some of my lived experiences. And we're almost done. We're going to have plenty of time for questions, I think. So real quick, when is the right time to talk about death? Again, super biased. Always and often, is my opinion. And I prefer to have a sense of humor about it. But yes, use brave discernment, right? And I have certainly noticed that those who are in the upper decades, either they're really into talking about it or really not. There's not a lot of middle ground. I think in a medical context, just starting to really own it, like especially when there's been an initial and like an actual diagnosis, and when the patient is in a place of like, okay, what does this mean? Really, for end of life doulas, we would say before an acute need. I can't tell you how many people call me when they have a couple of days and they're just so dysregulated and so panicked. It's really hard to help. Can we? Yes. Will we? Yes. But it doesn't have to be quite that pressurized. And if we normalize this, and if our partners in the world, like senior living facilities and hospices, start saying, like, doulas help, this is a thing, and vice versa, I just think there's a mutual benefit to all of this and sharing in the small moments in your own personal life. So I frequently will hear a song and be like, do not play this at my funeral. Never. Don't play this song. Like I just talk about it. I normalize it. Um, or this one, please make sure this everyone's doing this, or please serve this food at my funeral, or hey, I don't want this to happen. And just sort of talking about it, right? And then if you want to be more intentional and more planful, that's certainly an option. One positive thing that I think is happening is that the culture really is starting to shift. So I just spoke to a funeral director, Caitlin Ottman with La Paloma the other day, and she said that she has noticed as a funeral director who also has end of life training as an end of life doula, is that there's way more pre-planning and more information gathering. And so this is beautiful. This is beautiful to see. And I do think death doulas have been a part of it. There are a lot of doulas on social media hosting talks like this, trying to get the word out about talking about it differently. And it's the tides are shifting. So I think that's a good thing. So to wrap up, at the end of the day, end of life doulas want to empower people and families with information and options. We want to support the entire care team. And I really do think when we work with other people, like I think the staff at senior living communities, like it's a lot sometimes. And some of the clients and patients and residents are difficult. And it's okay to hold both that this person was difficult and man, it's just sad, like another death. So I do also think there's room to support from a peer standpoint as well. And then advocate. So advocating for just going for having the information and creating the kind of opportunity that hasn't totally existed and having a more robust and well-rounded kind of support. And then the last thing I'll just say is that at the end of the day, the point of all this work is to have a sense of presence so that the limited resource of time comes into focus, that there's an intentionality with our choices, like it's magnified at this point, and we have a say in it. And really, at the end of the day, the goal is can we get to a point that the life was fully lived, that we were mindful and we did the best we could with what we had. So that was 41 minutes-ish of me chatting. I'm going to actually move to questions and thoughts first, and then I'll share any upcoming events and information for the Doula Co-op and myself. So I'm curious, you can say in the chat, was this interesting, helpful? Were you able to frame up anything different? Were there any Q&A, Amy?
We did not have any Q&A. That was an incredible presentation. Thank you so much. I'm
Oh,
sure
you're welcome.
everyone learned a lot. I hope. I know I did. There were no questions right now, but we do invite others to put your questions in, or you can put them in the chat. I did have a couple others that I'll just pop out to you for right
Yeah.
now, giving people some time. When is a good time to consult an end of life doula? You kind of went through some of that, but
Yeah.
just if there's any other context to add,
Yeah, no,
that'd
I
be
definitely
great.
do. Oh, and I see Sarah has a question here, and I'll come back to that in a second. Thank you, Sarah, for that question. I think it sort of depends on where you are in life. And so if you're young and healthy and you just haven't even thought about it, because I do consultations with people where we just sort of talk through, well, what do you need? And sometimes it's just pointing them in the direction of like, here's some basic things you should have in order, right? And if you're like I was young and poor, I was an artist, I was an actor, remember? So I didn't have like financial advisor. I didn't have like really regular income. I didn't have an estate planner or any of that stuff. But there were just some basic things about even knowing like, will a living will work in your state? What are some, and there are many easy and free forms that you can fill out just to even organize who you would want your medical power of attorney to be. Um, Oh, Joyce Ray is here. I didn't know. That's a family friend. Thank you, Joyce. And so some other things. So when you have questions, if you're not sure, even just to consult, like, what would it mean? What do I need? So if there's any, and I would say if you're having any concern or fear about death, that's a great time to talk to someone, just to talk about it. If you have a therapist, I mean, definitely go to them too, but that's just another way that an end of life doula can say like, cool, what's your sitch? What you got going on? What are you most worried about? Here's some easy things that you can go do. I mean, Five Wishes is a great book and website that it just helps you even start the conversation of what are some things I need to think about for the end. I would say if you have children or dependents who care on you with limited capacities that need support, you should absolutely prioritize having some of that stuff organized. I mean, the guy I was referencing before, it was a friend's landlord, and my friend was affected because he had like 42 properties and she was his tenant and he died suddenly. And then all of a sudden the family was like, we're selling everything, we're not doing this. And she had to move out, like, because he didn't have anything organized. So his life ending affected how many families who had to figure out just because there wasn't any sort of organization. So I would say if you have assets and dependence, that's a reason to just get something organized. And if you're at all hesitant and just not sure, anything is better than nothing. I think in the world of like, there's a really overwhelming time in the planet right now, and anything is better than nothing. And quite frankly, once you start doing it, it does actually get less overwhelming. But we just need like a tiny little snowball just to start rolling, and then all of a sudden it feels good and you start doing more and more and more. So, I want to come back. I think there was a question. How many clients do you have or schedule? So that's a great question. I'm a solopreneur as well, which means I wear 45 hats. And I have three funnels, right? So I have Reiki clients. So usually I only take, it depends on the situation. So I only have two formal end of life clients right now. I also have like several clients, like 5 to 7, who are relatively healthy and we're just sort of, and they're older. So they're in their like 70s and 80s. And I don't know where they're going to go, but they're healthy and we check in and that their families know about me. And so they'll call when it's time. So that's kind of an interesting thing about the business, and you really have to do it in a way that works for you. And I think that's also why I have more than one, from a business perspective, why I have more than one revenue stream, because I can't just do end of life work. I know that for my spirit and my soul. And I really just want to be present with a couple of people at a time. So 1 or 2 people, take a break, like refill, soothe my soul, and then go back. So I'm pretty picky when it actually comes to my end of life stuff for active death and that kind of stuff. But I do like a 6 session planning series with people, and that I book if I have the time in my calendar. So I usually book out 2 to 3 weeks in advance for all the different things that I offer. I do work with people remotely and in person. So I don't know if this answered your question, Sarah, but specific to like if someone's actively dying, I really don't do more than 1 or 2 at a time because I really want to be present and it depends on their situation. Um, Thank you, Joyce Ray, for coming. Kristen, challenges in getting people to understand the difference between palliative care and hospice, and people adding end-of-life doulas to that give you 1,000. I totally feel it. And in some ways, I'm sorry, we are adding to the confusion. And what's the best way to clarify the role? Yeah, I mean, I think for me, the phrase is non-medical logistical support. And sometimes I feel like I'm more of a project manager or I'm quarterbacking the other stuff that they're doing to help keep them organized. Um, oh yeah, I will show the grief circle info again, Sarah, and then I'll come to your question, Valerie. So non-medical support. And and the thing is with palliative and hospice care, because part of it is just about individuals actually knowing the difference. And for me, neither one is saying that it's the end and we're giving up. And this is really also such a tender conversation because that matters to the person who's experiencing the illness. And I think that's also why what I'm more interested in is end of life doulas getting in before we're even there so that we can start to define that. Because the reason that conversation is so hard, in my opinion, between palliative and hospice is because we're unwilling to talk about the fact that death is even coming and it's inevitable. We're just not willing to talk about it. So the minute you mention it, everyone's like, "Oh, it's over, we're all dying." It's like, "Yes, I'm literally dying now." But that's my personal perspective. Like, I'm closer to dying than not, most likely. I'm 45, so maybe not. But I hold that belief like with comfort, and I'm not afraid of dying anymore. I can't control it. I hope I get as much time with my family as I can, but also I've just come to peace with it. So you have to confront it to be able to talk about it. And so I think I've always and have wanted to talk more with oncologists and palliative care doctors just about this in general and to really host like a public conversation. That's one of the things I would love to do. So if anyone's out there and is interested, let us know. How do you approach culturally diverse families who may have different beliefs about death? Yes. So, one, that's one reason for interviewing different doulas. And there's absolutely a need both in birth and death to have cultural congruency. Um, so I work really hard to be informed and aware of different beliefs. And part of my intake is just understanding what's the spiritual philosophy and background of your family and you. Is it different now? Do you have any expectations of things that you want? So, for example, I'll actually use my mom. My mom has been a practicing Catholic for a long time, but recently had said, "Oh, just carry me around with you, or you can spread me around. I don't care what you do." And I was sort of like, "Well, do you care if it's in alignment with the Catholic faith? Because if you do, there are some things that the fathers would like you to not do, which is not separate your ashes. They want it and they want it interred. Like that is part of the faith." So one, if I don't know, I try to find out. But two, I make sure part of it's just asking, and I work to be congruent. And if they have the spiritual support you need, I'm not going to do that, but I am going to get to know their faith leader and say, "How can I help? Anything you want me to know? What should I do?" And I think having been exposed to some different families and different cultures, that's where I'm learning. But I also own when I'm like, "Hey, I don't know a lot about this." So, and not to ask you to do any labor, but if you want to work with me, just know I'll need to do some learning on my end. And if there's anything I should know. And that's one of the intake questions is also because there's times where you have to ask, like, is there anything your family doesn't know about you? Or is there anything, like they're not practicing a faith right now and they have to actually tell their parents they don't want to be buried or they don't want these things. And so sometimes really tender things come up. So I think I do the best I can. As soon as I know better, I do better. And I definitely refer people to other doulas when I think they might be a better fit than me. And I think that's the best that anyone can do. So I don't know, Valerie, if I answered that, but that's the hope. And then how I fit it all in. Yeah, thank you, Sarah. Some days. Some days it's a wild fit, but it's also because I have ADHD and I need to do a million different things, so it just works out. I don't know if there's any more questions. Oh, thank you, Valerie. Okay, good. Nope. One
There
more. Here we go.
is there is one question
Yes,
in the
tell me.
Q&A.
Yes.
And it's from Carly. She's asking, do you typically charge a flat rate or hourly? And then the
Mm.
second part of the question, and you might need to clarify this, Carly, in case we get this wrong. How did SIT work with less or more needs from clients in this respect? So I'm not quite
Mm.
sure of the second part of the question, but
Well, I'll
Melissa, you
answer
might
the first
understand
part.
that.
I'll
Okay.
answer the first part. I'm not sure about the second part, but I can answer the first part. We'll see if Carly clarifies. Both. So this is again where I just meet people where they're at, and it depends on what they want. So this is also why it's kind of hard to be like, how much do you charge? I'm like, I don't know. What do you need? So I have an hourly rate, right? And if you just need me, so for a while, I've had a client who what she this is all she needed me to do. She needed me to take her mother who had dementia on walks because she couldn't do it and she needed a break. So I would show up and I honestly so it was an hourly rate and I would show up and I would take her mom on a walk and in a 45-minute walk we would have the same conversation no less than 85 times. It was a delight. We got her outside, we got her back in, and that's what I did. And then I've also put together packages. So I had one client who came who like knew her partner was dying, knew she didn't have much time, but didn't know how much we had. I actually had a trip scheduled. And so I went in, did some stuff with them and their family together. I spent time with him just to process that where he was and help him have some of the hard conversations with his kids. I had the conversations with his kids. And then I got to be with them before I left. Then I left town and he passed. So it was it was only a 2-week thing. And part of what was built into that package was some Reiki sessions for him, for her, some guidance and some follow-up calls. And that's what I did. So I really do tailor it. And not every death doula works that way. But because I'm a bit of a generalist and because they're just different needs at different times, I do both. And I work with people because also, oh, great, Carly, good. You answered your question. And so sitting vigil, I usually charge way less for. If that's the only thing you need, because also it's hard. This is hard work, but also the people who do this work do need to be paid. And sometimes that's the answer is like, can you just do this for free? And it's like, this is a really private and intense place to be. And to recognize the kind of emotional or presence, and not everyone's built to hold it, but that's why the people who are called are truly called. And so it's just figuring out how to make it work. And I think a lot of us as end-of-life doulas who are also in the death positive and in the place of wanting there to be a sense of equity in death is that we try to work with people. So I know many of us sort of have a sliding scale. So I do have costs where it's like, if you need support from the community, here's one price. Here's the actual price of the service. And then if you're a resource and have the ability to give more, this is the price because it will allow me to work for people for either discounted or free rates. And I've also done things where I've posted online to be like, hey, someone needs help and they just need some like grief sessions. Can anyone donate? And like, can I help? And sometimes I do. I work for free, but I can only do that so often. And I try to offer a pay what you can day once a quarter. So if someone wants to come in for Reiki for their grief, because I do a lot of grief Reiki and I do a lot of Reiki when people are processing their stuff. So I try to make it available in that way, right? And so I think just finding the balance. So I hope that answered the questions. I want to respect everyone's time. And I don't know if there's a couple more. I'll check in with you, Amy, but I really just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to learn about us and the doula co-op and the things that we can do. I have a grief circle coming up on March 17th. It's a donation-based offering. One of the other doulas of the co-op hosts a grief talking circle on Wednesdays at House of Ra. That's weekly on Wednesdays, I believe from 6 to 7. It's only an hour. And then Emily, who I think is here, holds a death cafe. It will be tonight from 6 to 7:30 at Wildflower on 7th. I meant to have that so I could copy and paste. So Emily, if you're still here, feel free to put that in. But we have people who are doing more of the work, and I think they're all beautiful, and they're all death cafes specifically for anyone not familiar are not grief spaces. So it's okay to be sad, but we're not processing grief. But Britt Keene and I both have grief circles, and some of the hospices in town have grief circles. So there's many different options, but I think we're all just trying to do this work, and there's so much space for us to do more of it together. So I just really want to thank you all so much. Amy, any other questions or anything else for you?
No, those were all of the questions. I think that was it. And I would just invite anybody else that is working in this space. You mentioned some of your colleagues in Southern Nevada.
Yes.
If you have any events you want to drop in the chat for our friends on the call in Southern Nevada, that would be really helpful for everyone because this is an important statewide effort. And
Yes.
yeah, we just really want to thank you. And I'll turn it over to Kristen after that.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
thank you so much, Melissa. This was a fantastic presentation and conversation. We really appreciate it. This webinar will be added to the Nevada Cancer Coalition YouTube shortly. We have a post-webinar survey that we would really appreciate you filling out. It will be on your screen after this webinar closes. You'll also get it by email. If you have any future questions, reach out to Melissa or send your questions to us, and we're happy to forward them along to her. Thank you all for joining us.
Awesome. Thank you all so much.